This lantern-lit town still hides its secrets. Walk beneath flickering lanterns, where Hamelin's cobblestones seem to whisper secrets with every soft tap of your feet. Feel the cool night air, alive with stories and questions that won't sleep. The legend of the Pied Piper waits around the next shadowy corner. But what really happened here? Why did Hamelin need the Piper's music, and what vanished with that final haunting note? Tonight, we'll look past the old story and uncover mysteries you've never heard before. Close your eyes and picture Hamelin as it once was. Not just a town drawn in a dusty storybook, but a real place, buzzing with life. Now, some say the mornings there started with the chatter of vendors rolling out barrels in the market square. Picture bursts of colour, red apples piled high, thick ropes of sausages swinging from beams, sunlight glinting off copper pots. But one year, everything changed. The rats came. Swift, greedy shadows running over rooftop tiles, gnawing at bread and scaring horses. Their squeaks and scrabbles haunted each alley and every home. People tried everything to be rid of them. Some put out cheese, thinking the stinky smell would draw them in. Others banged pots together at all hours, hoping to scare them away. Bakers began trapping the pests in their ovens by accident, leaving behind a sour smell that seeped into the streets. Kids couldn't play in the meadows without shrieks and squeals of sharp-toothed tails brushing their ankles. The rats were winning, and the townsfolk felt hopeless. Then, as if out of nowhere, a man appeared on the edge of the town square. Nobody knew his real name. Everyone just called him the Pied Piper because of the patchwork clothes he wore. Green, yellow, brick red, all stitched together in stripes and swirls. The colours looked odd in the middle of Hamelin's browns and greys. Some laughed when they first saw him, thinking he was just another travelling performer, but others felt the hair stand up on their arms. It was the flute he carried that caught everyone's attention. The wood was worn smooth from use, but little carvings ran along its surface. He lifted it to his lips, closed his eyes, and blew a note so bright and sharp it was like the first slice of sun on a frosty day. The melody started as a flutter, but soon it wrapped around the whole town, twisting around shop signs, skipping over puddles, drifting through kitchen windows, even waking sleeping cats with its shivers. Something strange happened. The rats, hundreds of them, maybe more, poked their noses out of cracks and gutters. Their pink eyes were wide, almost shining, as they tiptoed closer and closer to the Piper. He walked through the streets, barely glancing at the crowd, moving slowly, but never stopping his song. The rats followed, first by the dozens, then in one solid river of furry bodies, all minds locked onto a tune nobody but the Piper truly understood. Mothers gripped their children's hands tighter. Shopkeepers stood in their doors, mouths wide open. There was fear, but deep relief too. The rats were finally going. The Pied Piper, never missing a note, led the great parade out of town, down to the river's edge. Splash. One by one, the rats plunged in, pulled by music even deeper than their love of food and shelter. The water churned for a second, then smoothed over like nothing had ever happened at all. The town burst into wild cheers. The mayor danced a jig in his finest hat. Everyone rushed to thank the Piper, promising gold and praise. But when the time came to pay him for his miracle, the town's pride crept back. Town elders hissed. Well, it wasn't really magic, was it? The rats must have just been old and tired. It couldn't have only been the music. The mayor placed a handful of silver coins in the Piper's palm, far less than they'd promised. The Piper's eyes went cold. Without a word, he tucked the coins away, lowered his hat, and disappeared down the winding streets. Hamelin's folks, still giddy and tired from chasing rats, hardly noticed him slip away. They swept up crumbs, washed the last stains out of their tablecloths, and fell asleep for the first time in weeks without scratching or worrying about what might crawl under their doors. But Hamelin woke with a jolt the next morning. A single flute note pierced the dawn. Even those buried deepest in their blanket piles couldn't ignore the sound. When they pulled back their curtains, they saw something amazing, and then something terrible. The Pied Piper was back in his gleaming patchwork cloak. This time, his tune was lighter, fluffier, like a breeze that tickled your ears and made you want to dance. Children poured into the streets as if their slippers were drawn by puppet strings. Kids from every house, rich or poor, shy or bold, fell into step behind the piper, giggling, their faces shining with trust and delight. Some dropped their wooden toys and ribbons, not even noticing as the wind snatched them away. Parents hollered from doorways, "Come back! Stay inside!" But the children didn't hear them. They only heard the music. People shouted, ran, even tried to grab their kids back, but the melody rolled on like a spell. The procession wound through the twisting alleys, over the old stone bridge, and into the hills at the edge of Hamelin. Sunlight sparkled off the piper's cloak as the children vanished around a bend in the road, swallowed by the shadows of the mountains. Then, the music stopped.
Every single child was gone.
The silence in Hamelin was worse than any rat plague. Mothers fell to their knees in the square, clutching empty hands. Fathers searched behind every barrel and stable, shouting names until their voices cracked. Some villagers blamed the mayor and the elders for cheating the piper, their voices thick with anger and fear. Others only wept and rocked, listening for one final note that never came again. Let's pause here for a moment and imagine one scene often left out of the legend. Inside one small cottage on the edge of town. Picture a mother, tears streaming down her cheeks, hugging her son's favorite quilt to her chest. The toy wooden horse he carved just last winter sits untouched by the window, catching shafts of afternoon light. Out in the fields, a farmer stops mid-harvest, gazing at the hills, heart pounding with equal parts hope and dread. "Maybe," he whispers, "they'll come home by supper. Maybe this is just a wicked trick." A grandmother leaves a crust of bread on the doorstep, as if a gentle hand might snatch it up in the night. For so many families, time seemed frozen in those painful days after. The hopes, fears, and desperate bargains made in whispered prayers. Strangers arrived to see if the story was true. Merchants and minstrels weaving through the market would listen to the hollow quiet, then hurry away, unsettled. Some scribbled down what they'd heard, passing the tale across the region. In a nearby orphanage, a caretaker cautioned rowdy children with, "Mind your word and keep your promise, or the piper might come for you too." Days turned into weeks. The sun rose and set over a town hushed by pain. Some believed the children had been taken by magic, whisked away to another world. Others whispered about dark bargains and old curses. There were those who clung to wild hope, sure that any day they'd hear the sound of kids' laughter spilling back down the streets. But Hamelin's streets stayed empty, the echoes too sharp, the holes in every family too big to fill. Time passed, but the story stuck. People told it over fireplaces, in letters, in half-remembered lullabies. The legend changed a little each time. Was the piper a hero, a villain, or something stranger? Did he teach the town a lesson, or was he only out for revenge? Nobody agreed, but everyone remembered the shock, the regret, the haunting, heart-deep ache left behind. And the strangest part? You can still visit Hamelin today and follow the route where the piper and the children once danced away. Brass markers, shaped like rats, are set into the old town's pavement. They're reminders of a legend that left more questions than answers. Why did Hamelin really need the piper's magic? What truly happened in those final moments? And can any song ever bring the missing children, or that bright spark of innocence, back home again? But that wasn't even the strangest part. If you stand very still on a summer evening in Hamelin, locals say, you might just hear the faintest strain of flute music winding down the alleys. Sometimes a curious child will tug on a tourist's sleeve and whisper, "Don't wander too close to the old hills, or the piper might come for you too." The legend feels alive, etched into the worn cobblestones, sighed into the breeze that rustles the town's ancient trees. It's not just a story parents tell, it's a weight that lingers, making you wonder what's real and what's only memory. But the tale's mystery doesn't end here. In the next section, we'll dig into what could be hiding behind the legend. Real clues, forgotten facts, and secrets that might be more unsettling than any song. Ready to follow the melody? Let's leave the swirling colours and drama of legends for a minute and step right into Hamelin as it hummed with normal, everyday life. Sometimes the most magical stories aren't the ones with spells and mysteries. They're the ones growing quietly in kitchens and courtyards, woven into people's daily routines. The very first sliver of sunrise would sneak across Hamelin's sky, brushing mossy rooftops with gold and making each dew-soaked cobblestone shine. The air was thick with the smell of baking bread. Down every winding street, bakers shoved heavy loaves into stone ovens. Ash floated through open windows and landed on sleeping cats who stretched and blinked in the warm, yeasty air. You could hear the thunk of dough landing on wooden boards and the scrape of flour-dusted hands. Before most folks had rubbed the sleep from their eyes, the market square buzzed with hope and business. Vendors in rough-spun tunics hauled baskets of radishes, coins, and apples to their stalls. A fishmonger splashed water from a metal bucket onto her pile of shining silver fish, laughing at her neighbour who tried to sell linen in every shade. There were wrinkled grandfathers trading stories and wrangling price deals, kids darting between tables, sneaking prunes and getting chased off with grins. Wooden carts rattled by, pulled by shaggy horses whose tails swished lazily through clouds of flies. Inside the town's homes, families huddled together before their cracked fireplaces, sharing the morning's bread and creamy cheese. Mothers braided their daughters' hair, carefully twisting ribbons in and whispering stories that stretched long and wild. Sometimes the only sound was the clink of crockery, spoons tapping against clay bowls of steaming barley porridge as parents planned out their long day ahead. Children's laughter bounced off stone walls, running wild from yard to yard. A pack of boys tried to balance on a fence while a young girl in blue pigtails beat them all in a foot race down a muddy alley, her bare feet moving way faster than anyone's shoes. Nearby, apprentice blacksmiths hammered glowing metal into arrowheads, the metallic crashes echoing far and wide. One elderly weaver would always wave from her doorway, hands busy with clattering needles as merchants nodded to each other and passed news from house to house. In every corner of this town, there was a special kind of rhythm, a steady, loving pulse that kept time as surely as the church bell ringing out the hours. Every new day felt like a small celebration, even with its hard work and old troubles. Smells and sounds mixed, the sweet scent of bruised apples, the sharpness of onions, soot, and the endless peal of children's voices. The people here cherished the comfort in their daily routines and familiar faces smiling back at them over heavy jugs of milk. Yet between all this sweet, ordinary bustle, there were quieter pockets, secret, slow moments that don't show up in old stories. A grey-haired woman would sweep her stoop every morning, careful to make a perfect pile of dust even if the wind kept blowing it away. She'd pause to listen to the church bells strike, a warm, echoing sound that made every crack in Hamelin's walls feel whole again. Cats with bushy tails swished through the shade, sometimes yowling, sometimes snoozing in baskets left forgotten in the sun. During afternoons, faded sunlight dripped through stained glass windows. These were the silent hours, when even the market muttered instead of shouted. Blacksmiths rested their heavy arms, merchants dozed with hats pulled over their faces, and the old priest walked the lanes, his soft shoes raising tiny clouds of dust. If you listened carefully, you could hear the wind shifting through laundry lines, carrying away secrets along with shirts and scarves. Little kids pressed their faces against bakery windows, noses flattened, hoping for a sweet crumb or a smile from the baker's wife. There were times in the evening when Hamelin glowed. Lanterns hung by doorways, throwing warm halos across narrow streets. Shopkeepers swept their doorsteps, ready for another new day. Friends stopped to share news or ask about a sick goat, making big gestures and even bigger promises. The whole town seemed to sigh with relief as the last sun slid behind distant hills. But to get a real sense of how deep these routines ran, let's look closer at just one family. Imagine Anna and her grandmother, Greta, sitting side by side next to the window. Greta's needle flashed as she worked on a patchwork quilt, piecing together scraps from old tunics, each square with its own story. Anna, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, asked, "Granny, why do bells sound so different in the morning?" Greta smiled, her fingers pausing. "Because in the morning, everyone listens. By night, we're too busy dreaming." Down in the square, the butcher's youngest son, Matthias, darted between legs, calling out greetings. "Good morning, Frau Hoffmann. Have you seen my dog?" And Frau Hoffmann, hauling a basket of vegetables nearly as large as herself, just laughed. "He's probably after the baker's scraps again." Their voices wove through the street, filling it with life. On the other side of the square, Herr Becker, the shoemaker, stretched out a row of tiny leather shoes, humming under his breath. Each pair looked a little different, and you could see the pride in his hands as customers admired his craft. On festival days, the marketplace exploded with extra colour. Jester hats, banners, the clang of bells strapped to dancing kids. But even on plain old Wednesdays, there was joy in the little things, like a neighbour offering a mug of cider warming between chilled fingers, or a pair of old friends playing dice near the well, their laughter carrying down the street. It was a place where people knew each other's voices and worries by heart, where every celebration and every heartbreak echoed in the stones and the air. The air itself seemed heavier at dinner, scented with roasting onions and wood smoke, as everyone hurried home before curfew bells. People locked their shutters, whispered blessings, and shared tales of luck or loss with their families. On cool nights, music drifted through half-open windows, a fiddler's tune, or the soft sound of someone singing their children to sleep. Even the street cats had their own routines, winding through alleys for scraps, or leaping onto windowsills just in time for a hand to slip them a bit of cheese. And if you asked an old-timer about Hamelin, they'd always mention those quiet evenings, the feeling that, no matter what troubles came, home was just around the corner, warm light spilling across the street stones. It's easy to think of Hamelin as a place cursed or haunted. But before any legend ever took root, it was a town full of loves, worries, and dreams. People counted their blessings, a full grain bin, a daughter's laughter, or a long story shared in the comfort of dusk. This was the world that the Piper stepped into. A close-knit community, always hoping for good seasons, praying for gentle winters, and trying to keep the little bits of magic they'd built safe from strange things outside their gates. Imagine the tension building then, when the smallest things began to go wrong. The first rumours of rats, the flicker of fear in neighbours' eyes, the slow, creeping sense that something, somewhere, was about to break their beautiful balance. Because every legend needs a normal life to protect and lose. Hamelin's days were rich and beautiful, even without magic. They were made up of hard work, sunlight tangled in a child's hair, and the way a lantern's glow promised safety. That's the world that got shaken. And those are the people who lost the most when a stranger's song echoed down their streets more powerfully than any bell or child's laughter ever could. So how could one tune change everything? And what does a normal, loving town do when a mystery walks in and turns everything upside down?
And then everything changed.
It started as just another market day in Hamelin, right at the hinge between morning and afternoon. The whole town was alive. Noise rolling over the rooftops, bargaining, laughter, and the clatter of hooves on stone. Fruit sellers argued over apples, the baker dusted flour from his apron, and children's shouts blended with the caw of rooks overhead. But there was a weird shiver in the air, a feeling people couldn't quite name, like the sky was holding its breath. Suddenly, all conversation died. Heads turned as someone spotted a ripple of movement at the far end of the town square. Backlit by sunlight, a figure stepped into the open, cloak flaring out in a crazy burst of colours, teals and golds, rusty reds and grass greens, stitched together with thread that sparkled as it caught the light. Every eye was pinned on that vibrant patchwork coat, no one blinking as the stranger's shadow stretched long and thin. The sight seemed more like a dream than a real person walking among them. The man's boots were soft leather, slapping lightly on the stones, like someone tapping out a rhythm only he could hear. His hat was tall, sharp at the tip, with a feather so blue it glowed. Slung over his shoulder was a silver flute, shining as he spun it lazily between his fingers. In that moment, even the most practical townsfolk, like old Mrs. Keller, who never believed in fairy tales, stared, open-mouthed. Somebody whispered, "It's the Piper." But the hush that fell wasn't just from surprise. There was fear, delight, and a kind of hunger in the air. A hope for something new, and a dread of what that might cost. It felt like the whole town had slipped sideways into a storybook. He raised the flute and played a single, clear note. Like a ripple on a pond, it cut through every sound in the square. The vendors stopped shouting. Mothers froze mid-sentence, sacks of flour halfway to the ground. The old priest paused, a bag of apples in his hand. For a split second, you could have heard a pin drop. That first note was sharp, full of sparkling, icy promise, almost as if winter itself had blown through the sunlight. It hung in the air, tugging at everyone's attention like a memory you can't quite reach. A young girl at the edge of the square whispered to her friend, "Did you feel that?" And her friend, wide-eyed, just nodded. Then the melody grew. It twisted and soared, nimble and playful, but with an edge that got under your skin and wouldn't let go. As the tune spun out, people could feel it working its way past their thoughts, reaching something softer and secret inside them, the part that remembered lullabies or longed for adventure. The music seemed to paint every brick and flower with gold. Even the birds grew quiet, heads cocked as if listening. Children, who'd been skipping rope or chasing each other around market carts, stood as still as statues. Their eyes got wider, faces slack with a dreamy sort of wonder. Slowly, as if every muscle in their bodies belonged to the same beat, they drifted toward the Piper. Not all at once, but by handfuls. First a boy in a yellow cap, then a girl with a doll clasped tight to her chest, leaving it behind as she walked. One little one rubbed his eyes, then smiled as if he'd found the world's best secret. Parents called, some grabbing for sleeves or reaching out, but even the bravest adults felt an icy pinprick of uncertainty. The music wasn't loud, but it was everywhere, curling off roof tiles, sliding under doors, echoing up through garden stones. It felt like the air itself was singing. Some adults followed, unsure whether to trust or run. Others hid, peeking through shutters, caught between wanting to watch history unfold and wishing for the dull safety of yesterday. You could hear whispers, frightened and awed. Will he take them all? Should we stop him? What happens if we can't? The Piper skipped through the alleys without missing a step, cloak billowing and boots barely touching the ground. He smiled, but it was a half smile, more like a puzzle than a welcome, and his eyes never stayed in one place for long. He seemed to dance on sunbeams and shadows, a living rainbow skipping among clouds of dust. As he wove through Hamelin, the children followed. Their feet tapped in unison, shoes slapping rhythms that matched the song's rising, impossible promise. When the Piper turned left, the line of children turned too, forming a snaking parade through winding streets. Cats zipped out of the way. Dogs barked, only to stop suddenly, ears flat and tails down, sensing there was magic in the mix. Even the lamplighter, who'd seen all manner of things in town after dark, dropped his pole in surprise. Windows filled with faces, some pressed close against the glass, breath fogging the panes. A grandmother held a candle between her hands, eyes wide, muttering a prayer that the breeze caught and fluttered away. At the edge of the main square, a young merchant shut his eyes and swayed to the music without meaning to, one hand clamped over his heart. Children's laughter mingled with the melody, carrying hints of both joy and unease. Nobody could quite tell if this was a parade or a farewell. Nobody ever forgot what sunlight looked like in that moment, spilling in gold over rooftops, catching in the Piper's swirling cloak, and making the whole town seem painted and unreal. Colours shone twice as bright, and shadows stretched like long velvet ribbons. The parade passed the bakery, the old mill, the stone bridge that creaked when too many feet crossed it at once. Every step left behind a feeling, like the town was slowly emptying out its heart. As the shadows grew longer and the music grew sweeter still, The piper led his following out of Hamelin, across fields that glowed with wild poppies and knee-high grasses swaying in the breeze. Some of the younger children glanced back, giggling, boots kicking up dust. Behind them, the town trembled between awe and terror. "What's happening?" someone cried. "Why are our children going?" But no answer ever came. The only voice was the music, strong, whirling higher and higher like a secret only the Pied Piper and the kids understood. Many parents ran after the parade, stumbling and breathless, but the piper and his line always seemed just out of reach, as if carried on their own special wind. Adults yelled for help. Some tried to grab onto their children's arms, but the invisible tether of the melody was stronger than muscle or warnings. The piper never looked back. Some folks say that the procession disappeared right where the meadow met the woods, swallowed up by green shadows and the rustle of leaves. Some swear the ground just opened, a cave or crack that hid them away forever. Others are sure they saw the whole parade slide into mist and fireflies, never to return. Each witness tells it a little differently. For one, the leaves turned silver as the children passed. For another, the sun seemed to blink and go cold. Mr. Schneider, the town's old clockmaker, insisted he saw a swirl of butterflies instead of children at the edge of the wood. Miss Greta, tears on her cheeks, said she heard a last note, bittersweet and beautiful, that filled the sky with colour no one could name. The music stopped as quick as it started, slicing off all sound in an instant. The silence came roaring back, heavier than 100 storm clouds. All you could hear was the distant chirp of a cricket. Parents looked around, their arms empty, hearts pounding with fear and guilt. The ground was littered with toys, shoes and ribbons, as if the children had simply vanished right out of the sunlight. Hamelin was changed in a blink. The road that just moments ago had danced with joy now lay empty, littered with a trail of dropped toys and ribbons. The piper's patchwork cloak was gone. No spark of colour, no laughter, no explanation. It was as if someone had pulled out the colour from the world and left it drained. The ordinary world felt mean and plain compared to the magic that had passed through. Nobody could explain how the music had pulled at their hearts. Some whispered that the tune held a special kind of longing, like homesickness wrapped in hope. Others thought it hid a cold warning. But everyone in Hamelin felt that something had torn its way through the very middle of their world and left behind a hole impossible to patch with bread, prayers, or simple explanations. Some say they can still hear the echo if they walk that road at dusk. But what did the piper really want? Was he right to take the children? Or was this just the cost of a deal gone wrong? Of all the gifts and curses that magic brings, which lasts the longest? The spell, or the silence that follows? The question is, why? And what happens next, when a town's heart is gone and the shadows are just beginning to settle? Let's find out in the next chapter. As Hamelin slowly picked up the pieces after that terrible, music-filled afternoon, the town didn't rush back into the comfort of daily chores and laughter. Instead, every whisper, every meeting, every line of ink in police records circled the one question: where did the children go? First, people crowded the mayor's office with demands and desperate hopes. The mayor himself, rubbing a tired forehead, ordered a search of every barn, hole and hiding place for miles around. Neighbours flipped haystacks, turned out pockets in old coats, and dragged the shallow river with sticks, praying for any sign at all. When the last ray of hope faded, a cold, aching silence rolled through the town like early frost. Some folks refused to let go, poring over scraps of old newspapers, letters, and rough police reports scribbled with shaky hands. Hamelin's tiny archives, lined with dust, soon became crowded by people tracing the names of missing children. Emily, Johann, Frida, Greta, and wondering what clues lay buried between wrinkled pages. Late at night, you could see candlelight flickering through the window of the archives, shadows of townspeople hunched together over maps and documents spread wide across oak tables, voices hushed and urgent. Old Mrs. Becker, who'd lost 2 grandsons, whispered, "There must be something we missed. He couldn't just vanish, with them, all at once." Someone's dog would sometimes bark at nothing out on the moonlit street, adding to the sense that, even after all this time, not everything hidden had been found. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses slammed a report down on the table one night and said he'd found a pattern. Every missing child was under 13, and they all lived on the sunny side of the main square. Others questioned if the Piper had lured them for revenge, or if some secret society spirited them away for reasons too terrible to imagine. These theories grew. You'd hear old farmers at the market grumbling it had to be bandits, smugglers, maybe even spirits. Others, their voices trembling, wondered aloud whether the children had simply gotten lost in the deep forest, swallowed by the old stone caves the elders had always told stories about. In the next breath, someone would mutter, or maybe they ran to find a world where pipes don't make promises that grown-ups break. Grieving parents clung to every rumour. Some swore they'd seen footprints heading deep into the mountain, or flashes of colour, maybe the Piper's patchwork cloak just behind the trees. A handful of the old folks nodded gravely. They said there were caves in the hills, ancient tunnels no map ever captured. Stories surfaced about children running away to find better lives, lured by the whisper of a miracle. And some feared it was all a sad twist of fate, a landslide, a dazzling accident no one could have prevented. It's not just the records that give us hints. Hamelin's memory is kept alive by the people who lived through those days, or whose families did. Lena, whose grandmother still cries every year when the last day of June rolls around, says her ancestor watched the parade from a 3rd-story window, mouth covered in horror as her younger brother joined the line. No one believed it at first, Lena says, until the street was empty and the only things left behind were tiny shoes and the echo of the flute. Another man remembers his own grandfather vowing never to leave Hamelin's walls, terrified the Piper would return for the rest. He always said, "Don't sing too loud at night. Don't answer every stranger who comes with a smile." There are families with whole trees of grief, branches snapped short, names that barely lasted long enough to be written in a Bible or carved on a stone. Years later, a faded diary turned up in an attic, belonging to a teenage girl who lost her little brother that day. Her handwriting stuttered with grief. Mama sits by the window from dawn till the bats return, hoping he'll find his way back. Sometimes, when the wind rattles the shutters, we both look up, almost waiting to hear his knock. The diary ended suddenly, 1 week later, with a single line. "It's too quiet in this house now. Even the clocks have stopped counting." The town didn't bury the story with the search. Instead, they started lighting candles on the date every child vanished. First a handful, then a whole square full of flickering flames, making the night sparkle with memory and hope. The church bell rang slow and sad, and people stood silent together, not to chase away the pain, but to hold it up and share the weight. Over time, artists painted great murals on their houses and walls, splashes of colour showing the Piper, the long line of laughing children, and the hills in the far background. Little notes and ribbons got tied to the old tree near the stone bridge, each one a silent prayer wrapped in ribbon, asking for peace or a sign. In the narrow alleys, you can still find faint chalk hearts drawn by someone, maybe decades ago, maybe yesterday, trying to hold on to love in the face of mystery. One year, the school children were asked to craft small clay shoes for a memorial. No 2 pairs matched, and each tiny shoe was pressed with a name. Watching the children place those shoes in a circle on the green, townsfolk wept openly, remembering what was lost but feeling, for a moment, united against forgetting. Even as generations passed, the sense of loss clung to Hamelin. You could hear it in the pauses between laughter, in the way people counted children twice at every gathering. Some families never recovered, leaving empty places at the table and stories that faded into tears. The Piper's story changed Hamelin forever. People grew closer in some ways, tighter knit and careful. But the wound was always there. No one left their doors unlocked. No one let a child wander out of sight. For years after, Hamelin's festivals were quieter, games a little duller, smiles warier. The town's porch lights glowed all night long, warding off darkness with hope and determination. Some say the memorials, the candles, the whispered tales at bedtime, these are Hamelin's way of holding on to hope and keeping watch. The great murals have faded a little, but the story hasn't. If you walk along the cobbled streets at dusk, with the windows glowing and the bell sounding softly in the distance, it feels like the whole town is holding its breath, waiting for some sign, some answer to the question that still lingers. Where did they go? All these clues and memories, all this grief and guessing, pulse just below Hamelin's surface. Each theory, each silent candle and mural is another attempt to patch a mystery that refuses to be understood. The Piper's story is more than a legend now. It's become a mirror for the town's hopes, scars and courage in the face of what can't be explained. But why did this story stick? Was it the mystery that gave it so much power, or something deeper, a need to remember and a hope that maybe one day the truth will rise like new sunlight over the old rooftops? So what happened next? Come with me as we dig deeper into the shadows the Piper left behind. Night in Hamelin is colder now, and maybe quieter too. At the end of each June, on the night when the children disappeared, families, visitors and strangers light candles along every ledge and step. Hundreds of tiny flames stagger in the darkness, trembling in the wind. Each one marks a memory, a short life gone, a hope that never came home. But if you look closer, you'll see how each person mourns in their own way. At the base of a statue, an old man in a worn wool coat kneels, his hands shaking as he lights a candle. He glances sideways, as if making sure no one sees the tears in his tired eyes. Beside him, a little girl with bright red mittens gently places a yellow flower at the shrine, her mother whispering, "For them, sweetheart," before placing a soft kiss on the girl's hair. The scents mingle, wax, wind, a trace of wild time. Someone pours warm cider into paper cups, and the steam drifts up and across their faces, mixing with the misty cold. If you walk those streets, you'll hear mostly silence, but sometimes a low song carries, soft and full of longing. Not a melody for dancing, but for remembering. You may hear an old woman's voice, quivering as she leads others in a lullaby once sung to those lost children. Sleep now, safe where dreams may roam. People gather in warm silence, shoulders touching in the hush, faces painted gold by candlelight. Some cradle photos or trinkets, whispering prayers they can't say in daylight. One father, holding a faded ribbon, says softly, "I wasn't even born yet, but I know the pain." Tears might roll down a woman's face, lit up for a moment, and then swept away by her sleeve. This candlelit ritual is more than a tradition. It's how Hamelin faces its grief together, not just as individuals, but as a single heart. When the bell tolls on the hour, the sound is heavy with what's gone missing. You can see grown men hold hands tightly and mothers drawing their kids close, afraid and brave at once. Every year, the circle of light grows, as if the memory travels further than the darkness ever will. Looking through old, black and white photographs, you can find images of the first vigils. A few women in headscarves, a baker still in his apron, all staring quietly at burning wicks. Now, the night glows with hundreds of tiny suns, and drone footage captures the breathtaking sight. A river of flickering gold winding through cobblestone alleys. Local news once interviewed Marta, an elderly teacher, who said, "We lost so much, but sharing this night, we find each other again." Legends grow in places where pain and hope get tangled. Hamelin's story isn't only about loss, it's about the ways people hold on, sometimes in big, noisy processions, sometimes in the way they tuck a note or toy into a crack in a shrine. The shrine near the bridge over the river always glimmers with new mementos, a toy sheep, a scrap of music, a simple coin. Even tourists visiting from distant places press their palms to its stone, hoping the ache in the legend will help lighten their own secret sorrows. There's a small notebook protected in plastic, wedged deep in the stones. It bulges with messages. A child's scrawl, "I miss Grandpa," a scribbled love song, a hopeful wish. Let them return to those who need them. When the caretaker collects the offerings each season, she murmurs, "It never ends." The remembering, the wanting. She folds lost mittens, peels brittle flowers from the granite, and sometimes finds candies hastily wrapped in crumpled paper. Many people wonder why Hamelin's pain never faded fully. You can almost taste it in the air during the dark days of winter, bitter as medicine, but mixed with something gentle, a belief that what's remembered isn't truly gone. In a way, the town's grief knits people together, reminding them that everyone will lose and everyone can comfort. You see it in how kindly they treat lost animals now, or how quickly they notice when someone seems lonely or out of place. It's not just the old legends that help Hamelin heal. It's the little moments, neighbors checking in, teachers listening closer, children drawing hearts on cold window panes. Each act of kindness is a small step against forgetting. Last year, someone left a line of painted stones along the river, each one marked with a name or a tiny songbird, leading lost souls home, stone by stone. But the piper's song never leaves, not entirely. Older folks say you can sometimes hear a note or two curling in on a late breeze, or that chilly air means he's near. The story haunts newcomers, who, rattled by their first candlelit vigil, start wondering about the meaning behind fairy tales and why people cling to them even after centuries. One teenager told me, "It's scary, but kind of comforting. The story gives us a way to talk about hurt without having to say everything out loud." How much of the legend is about lost children, and how much is about the world's need to make sense of the unfair, the unexplained? Some say the agreed story is only a shell. Each person tucks their own meaning inside it. Maybe the legend is a warning, a tool to teach honor and the price of broken promises. Maybe it's hope, a reminder that what's missed or mourned doesn't have to vanish entirely as long as someone remembers. Still, the story doesn't let Hamelin settle. Hope and loss live side by side, making space for each other. At every vigil, someone starts a soft song. At every festival, a little flute music floats through the square. Kids play with painted pipes instead of dolls, and grown-ups buy tiny cloaks for luck. The rituals keep the ache gentle, never letting it turn fully to anger or fear. The legend's grey edges won't sharpen into a perfect picture, but that's its strange gift. Ambiguity gives comfort and possibility. Some people say the tale is less about a vengeful piper and more about how a town survives heartbreak by refusing to let go of memory, even when it hurts. Local historian Klaus once said, "We live with the questions. Maybe that's what keeps us human." Look at the old mural near the market. Grown faded now, but still bright in spots. Little hands have traced it over and over, reaching for faces they never met. Stories like Hamelin's help us carry secret aches we don't always know how to name. They show us how to push back the dark, even for a day, and remind us that other hearts beat with ours in the shadows of old sorrow. Why do so many towns, so many families, come back to this story? Because in the end, every legend is a way to carry what words can't quite reach. The wish that some music, somewhere, might still bring the lost home. So what keeps this legend alive? What else do we carry, knowingly or not, from old vanished Hamelin? The answer might just surprise you, and it might be closer than you think. Legends are funny things. They change clothes as often as people do. The story of the Pied Piper didn't just stay stuck in one place or time. As Hamelin's candlelit mystery spread from family to family, it rode out on letters, storytellers, and wandering minstrels. Every place that heard the piper's music found a new meaning in it, each version echoing through different hearts and homes. Imagine being in medieval Hamelin, long before electricity, when night fell like a thick black curtain. The only light came from flickering candles which sent wild shadows dancing across stone walls. Villagers huddled close together, every creak and distant whistle making the story of the piper seem as real as the wind rattling the shutters. Old folks, hunched by the fire, might murmur, "Remember, never break your word, or you could lose what matters most." They'd point to small Piper talismans hanging in windows, sewn with threads of red and green to match the Piper's famous cloak. One grandmother, her hands trembling slightly, tucks a little red feather over her grandchild's bed and softly whispers, "For protection from tricksters, darling." These images made the Piper seem nearby, sometimes as a real danger, sometimes as a magical force you could bargain with if you were careful or clever. Through the centuries, the Piper's shape kept changing. When English minstrels retold the story in smoky, crowded taverns, the atmosphere was thick with the smell of ale and the sound of clinking tankards. The Piper became a symbol of everything mysterious, a grim visitor bringing disaster, or maybe even hope. Some storytellers described the children vanishing only to reappear miles away, starting a fresh life in another land. Some believed these lost children grew wise and joyful, finally free from the problems that haunted Hamelin. In one version, an old man, wiping tears from his eyes, might say to the children at his knee, maybe out there they never felt hunger or fear again. Maybe that music was a promise, not a curse. Artwork from every age has a different take on the legend. In the 1800s, artists painted the Piper with a swirling, almost hypnotic cloak. Sunlit gold one moment, midnight blue the next, while children's faces grew softer, uncertain, but hopeful as they stepped away from their parents. In one famous painting, you can almost hear the quiet echo of a flute as a line of children disappears beneath a green archway, nearly blending in with the forest beyond. Even now, film directors love to drench their sets in shadows and strange, tinkling tunes, drawing you into a swirling, uneasy world where anything could happen. And the emotional pull is powerful. For some, the Piper's tune is a call to adventure, a chance to break free of rules and find out who you really are. For others, it's the sound of loss and heartbreak, a reminder of the promises adults forget, or the helplessness we feel when something precious gets taken away. Writers and filmmakers know this well, using the legend to make us question every charming leader or too good to be true offer in our lives. Think about the way a beautiful song can catch in your mind, making you follow its tune without even realizing, and you'll understand just how deeply the Piper's magic works. This legend isn't just dusty history, it pops up in surprising places. In 1930s Germany, during a time of deep uncertainty, some teachers used the Pied Piper story to warn children against blindly following dangerous leaders. One teacher wrote to her class, "Don't let anyone play music that drowns out your own good sense." During tough times in American towns hit by the Dust Bowl, families told the tale while gathered around scratchy radios, using it to talk about promises made and broken by politicians. And it's not only about warnings. In modern Hamelin, every June, townspeople hold a cheerful festival where a piper, dressed in his wild patchwork coat, leads a parade of laughing children through the streets. The city's old stone clock tower chimes, and shopkeepers scatter flower petals, while bystanders press bright candies into children's palms. Instead of being scary, the legend has become a way to bring folks together, reminding everyone how important community is, and how old stories can change shape to fit new joys. If you look closely, you'll see the Piper's spirit in everyday life. A viral star on social media might gather millions of fans overnight, promising fun and belonging, just like the Piper's enchanted music. Politicians launch campaigns with catchy slogans, hoping to lead the people. Even more quietly, when someone convinces us to join a new fad or abandon old friends for something flashier, that's the Piper at work. Schools might show videos asking, "Is there a Piper behind this ad?" Parents still pause by windows thinking about the cost of broken promises and warning, "Be careful who you follow." All of this shows that at its heart, Hamelin's legend is about longing. Longing for a world that's fair, where wrongs are set right, and where nobody gets left behind. The imagery of the dark and twisting forest, the brightly cloaked stranger, and the haunting music reminds us what's at stake. Our sense of belonging, our trust, our hope for something better. So next time you hear wind whistling through empty streets or see a story about someone leading a crowd with dreams and promises, remember the Piper. Stop, listen, and ask yourself, what are we hoping for? And what must we be careful not to lose along the way? Just ahead, we'll follow the echoes deeper, tracing the legend's path into the world of modern storytelling, and finding out why the Pied Piper's steps still shape the adventures we chase and the fears we hide. Night settles over Hamelin differently now, slow and tender, like a familiar song that always lingers on its last note. If you listen, you can still hear the city breathing, the tick of lantern chains swaying in a gentle breeze, a distant laugh, and the faint hush as doors close for the night. Cobblestones glow under golden spills of streetlight. Moss clings to the old steps, green and shadowed, full of quiet stories that never even made it into legend. The main square, usually alive with trading and singing, empties as dusk slips deeper. You see only shop windows shining, some warm, some shuttered, all guarding memories. The air smells faintly of bread and damp stone, mixed with traces of old wood and flowers from hidden gardens. Under the leftover glow from street lamps, it's easy to imagine shapes in every archway, a swish of patchwork or a little hand curling in the shadows, waiting to be found. Yet as the world goes still, there's a comfort in this silence. Hamelin's people gather at windows and rooftops to watch the stars come out, first one, then two, then a sea of silver points. Sometimes a few families light a single candle and place it by the door. It's not about warding off bad magic anymore. It's more like an invitation, a quiet, shining wish that anyone lost, child, hope, or old memory, might find their way back home through the dark, drawn by gentle light and a promise of safety. The question of what truly happened here will never fully stop echoing. Maybe that's why Hamelin's story keeps calling to new people, each generation adding their own worry, wonder, or hope to the tale. Did the children ever return somewhere in someone's dream? Was the Piper wronged, or was he just a mirror for the town's own mistakes? Was it really about rats and promises at all, or was it about learning to hold on to each other against the world's noise? Tonight, like every night, tiny tokens of remembrance still appear across Hamelin. Tucked into cracks along the church's stone fences are little charms, some silver, some plain. In the cool shadows near the river, wreaths of wildflowers rest, set down by hands hoping for luck or forgiveness. In quiet corners, new parents whisper stories to babies too young to understand, and teenagers sneak through alleys on dares, laughing at old legends, but always pausing for one last look in the direction the Piper once walked. You might be tempted to close the book here, to wrap this up with some neat lesson, but that's not how living stories work. Hamelin's heart doesn't beat because of tidy answers or perfect endings. It beats because its people keep asking new questions, peering into shadows, choosing each day whether to trust or worry or hope. It beats because someone, somewhere, lights one more candle and waits for whatever comes next. Maybe you, watching this now, can feel your own questions rising. Maybe the next time you walk down a quiet street, you'll wonder what tales sleep beneath your feet. Who built those stones? Who lost something there? And who might one day find it again? Maybe you'll find yourself following a strange song, drawn not by magic, but by curiosity and the longing to understand what's always just out of reach. So let the story linger a little longer in you. Let the gentle ache and shimmer of Hamelin's legend make room for other mysteries, big or small. There's comfort in not knowing everything, in letting the melody stretch on past the last note. Maybe that's how the best tales work, not by giving answers, but by lighting small, flickering truths to carry with us into the growing dark. Think about the old baker who stands in his doorway every evening, clapping flour from his hands and gazing at the shadows stretching down the lane, searching faces for ones he used to know. Or the little girl who walks her dog past the stone fountain, humming the first few bars of a forgotten lullaby, the one her grandmother said would keep her safe. On festival nights, you might even hear an old man tell visitors, "Every city has its secrets, but ours dances in the moonlight." His listeners lean in, eyes wide, caught between fear and fascination. You can almost feel the cool night air brushing your cheek, taste the hope that hangs between words in every whispered goodnight and clinking glass. The feeling is bittersweet, both settled and stirring. It's knowing that Hamelin's story, like all the best stories, never really ends. The stars prick the sky, the wind sighs over the rooftops, and Hamelin rests, peaceful yet restless, lost yet found, full of stories you might be the next to tell. And that's the thing, some mysteries never sleep. Sometimes all we can do is walk gently, candle in hand, ready for the next story to find us in the night.